I'm Marc de Haas. I'm one of the architects at Crystalloids, and I'm going to present some best practices when building or using a CDP. And so in the previous talks, there was a lot of information about data, about package CDPs, headless CDPs. At Crystalloids, we have built a lot of CDPs for different kind of clients, and yeah, for me, it's a good opportunity to share some of those best practices that we had while building or using CDPs, and of course, leveraging the first-party data that is part of the CDP. So I'll just start with the first best practice. Best practice is utilize real-time data ingestion for your first-party sources. There are a lot of benefits if the data is fresh, the data is real-time, and of course, on the modern platform, it becomes much more easy to handle data in real time. So what kind of benefits do we have? Omni-channel activation personalization scenarios are easier to implement when you have real-time data available. As an example, a person visits your website. After the visit, you want to communicate with that person. So maybe because he put something in a basket, you can send him an email. But if the person did not open the email, you can then add that person, for example, to an audience to target them for search marketing. Scenarios like that in multi-channel are interesting, and you really need real-time data to do that. But also to keep your audience up to date. So if there's a new visitor and based on this behavior, you want to add it to an audience, you want to do that as soon as possible to have fresh audiences, but also have people retrack, of course, the consent. Audience have to be updated timely. Real-time data makes it possible to have timely optimization signals. An example for value-based bidding, a person somebody converts on your website, but you want to steer on profit. You want to be able to send that profit value immediately to your marketing channels, and especially that's handy because then in your marketing channel you can also see the profit value and the conversions that are there with the additional value. And other things is timely alerts. If things go different than you expected that it goes, then you get timely alerts. It could even be something like tagging breaks on your website, and you want to see quickly that, for example, conversions are not properly tracked or things like that. As part of this best practice, it is important how if you implement, and this is of course mainly for a headless CDP, but I mean also for package CDPs this can be applicable because you need to bring data also to your package CDP if that's the case. So really build an ingestion framework that is repeatable and scalable so that you can handle the real-time ingestion of all your data sources in a similar way. And an example that you can see on the sheet here is where at the first part you have really the loading of your data, and that can be different ways of doing it depending on the source system. So maybe your source system is able to send events to a webhook to an endpoint, and then you can stream it from there. Could also be that that the source system is not capable of doing that, but it has an API that you can call, and then you can do the loading there. You call the API once every 5 minutes or whatever, get the data and put it on a topic so that it can be processed. So handling it real time is important. Then, of course, processing it real time. There are different ways of processing. Sometimes you really want to do streaming analytics, windowing everything. Be sure that you have a capability to do it. But sometimes it's just a simple update that you get, and you just want to stream that through into your analytical data store. Of course, there are also other data sources that I mean, if you don't have to transform any data, you can also get the data and just stream it immediately into BigQuery. That's a very handy part. And of course, there are also data sources that natively bring data to the Google Cloud in near real time, like Google Analytics streaming data export is an example of that. As an example of how we implemented such an architecture for body and fit, it is a quite large diagram there, but on the left you see a lot of data sources. Some of them are capable of sending data real time. They are handled in a pub subtopic, but we also have data sources that are not capable of doing that. There we do get files, but what we do with those files, we process them, we just get those files and put the individual records on the pub subtopic so that all the processing is done in a similar way. This architecture is scalable. Adding a new data source is relatively simple because there is a framework, a way of handling data that is similar for all the data sources. And in that way, you can really quickly add new data sources or adapt to changes in data sources or add additional fields that come from data sources into this framework. Another very important best practice, implement a comprehensive identity resolution logic that is fully aligned with the given consent of the customer. And a good way of doing that is really maintain an identity graph. Store the relationships between identifiers. In most environments, there are multiple identifiers depending on the source system. And to maintain that, an identity graph can be a very handy way of formalizing, of implementing that. And it's not only about relationships between identifiers of a single individual. Of course, it's also relationships between individuals, especially in B2B situations where you want to know which company an individual belongs to. So an identity graph is a very flexible way of representing that information, and a very flexible way of handling that. Together with that identity graph, you want to store the consent with all the identifiers that you have available there so that you know which data, which identity can be used for what kind of activation purposes. So it should really be part of your data structure to have the data so that you can ensure that all the automation and all the things that we are doing is respecting the consent that has been given by the customers. Another very handy part of a proper identity graph is that it's easy to detect if a visitor or a customer is a new customer or a returning customer. For a lot of marketing strategies, that's an important thing to know. And you want to know it quickly because it can also be a signal that you want to send to your marketing platform for optimization. Also for the identity graph, and also important when you have consent implemented there, is that you can maintain your audiences in a proper way, so you can update your audiences when consent changes or when some additional behavior happens, and your customer is then, based on that behavior, becomes part of an audience. Some other interesting parts here, that as a best practice, you can utilize nice features like dynamic masking in BigQuery to make sure that people, analysts, data scientists, don't have access to data that they should not be able to see. And also, of course, automate the scanning and discovery of PII data. You can use data loss prevention for that, and that's really an automated process to make sure that you're compliant with the regulations, with the data in your CDP. Again, a bit more technical part, but you can, of course, utilize your real-time framework, ingestion framework, to implement this identity resolution and make sure that everything is up to date. Your account system has to send or can send real-time data into your framework is able to handle that real-time and update the proper fields that you need, either in your real-time data store or in your analytical data store. Here, I've added an example of a project for FD Media. For FD Media, we built a CDP, and one of the responsibilities of the CDP is maintaining, essentially maintaining the audiences that can be shared with the different brands and the different channels that are used by FD Media. So in this implementation, the identity resolution, but also the consent is made sure to be available, so that the responsibility of this central central layer for the audience is there. Everything is automated, so we are sure that we are fully compliant with the regulations based on the consent that is given. Another best practice. So go beyond customer data. We are talking about the CDP, and of course, CDP is about customer data. But for activation use cases, it's not only customer data that you need to activate. There are additional data sources that can be important for your activation use cases. And within your data environment, you want to be sure that that information is also available. We can think about, for example, product details, the cost of goods sold. For example, if you want to calculate profit, you need that information. Stock levels can be important. You don't want to promote personalized offers for products that are not in stock or are predicted to go out of stock quickly. But there are a lot of other data sources that can be interesting, like fulfillment, delivery status can be interesting. Of course, your marketing channels, performance data of your campaigns is important because you want to be able to steer and to have insight on that. But there are other data sources that can be interesting. Google Merchant Center bestseller or price competitive reports can be interesting as additional information you can use for your marketing strategy. Google Search Console data for SEO purposes, Google Trends, weather forecasts. These are all data sources that can be interesting to have together with your CDP platform to build activation solutions and personalization. Here I've got an example of an e-commerce company where we build a CDP, and here on the left side you can see a lot of data sources that are brought to the activation platform. So next to the Google Analytics data and the Google marketing products, we also have Merchant Center data, we have Search Console data, of course ERP data, CRM information is there, but also information from, for example, the affiliate partners and other search engine systems or social marketing tools. They are all ingested in near real time where possible, so that information is available for all kinds of activation use cases. And next to that, there can be other interesting sources like weather data if you have use cases that want to use that. So don't limit yourself only to customer data. Other data is definitely important for activation use cases too. A third, or number fourth best practice, data. You're ingesting data in a data platform, and data quality is of course an important part of that, but also business notifications if things change. And one of very important best practices to monitor data quality and also monitor the business processes is to implement statistical controls on the data. Statistical controls means that you apply statistical methods to monitor and control the processes. The good part of it is you can automate a lot of the data quality monitoring by doing that, by storing matrices like the number of records you get daily, the numeric ranges, the cardinality of fields. You can very quickly detect anomalies, deviations, changes there, and you can have automatic alerts on those data quality, or you can very quickly detect that data is not delivered completely, that you have incomplete delivery in a very automated way. Also, when you're applying a lot of machine learning, you also want to monitor the distribution of your fields. So if distribution of your fields change, and that could just be, could not be an error, but it's important information to detect this feature shift, so that could be a reason to update your models, to retrain your models, to create new derived fields, new features for your models, so that you are in control and know what is happening. And because it's a lot of data, this has to be automated. So it's not something you can just manually check once every month or whatever. So use statistical controls also for that. Web tracking data. Web tracking data is a very important data source for our CDP. And of course, the quality of the data also needs to be very good there. So yeah, make sure that you monitor that data too. Tagging errors happen a lot on websites. You want to detect them quickly so that they can be repaired, but also that you have that information. For example, if conversion tracking breaks for somehow, and you are steering your campaigns based on conversions, you have to know that, because you have to adapt your bidding strategy accordingly. For example, ignore the time where your conversion was not working in your for your bidding optimization in your marketing platform, so that you're not make mistakes or not optimally optimize your bidding. Yeah, that's the good side of using all those signals for marketing optimization. Is it's more optimized, more automated. But if the signals, if they fail, then of course you have to act quickly. Otherwise, without the proper signals, that mechanism doesn't work properly. Also very important, especially if you want to create alerts on things like if CTR changes or ROAS changes, it changes differently than you expect. Of course, you can always compare the ROAS of your campaign to the average ROAS of the last week or the last month. But yeah, the ROAS is not always the same. Very simple example: in the weekends we buy more. But also there can be events like Black Friday that are a lot larger. So by creating a forecast on your ROAS or on CTR or other matrices that you think are important, where you have the knowledge, it's something simple like the moment you send bulk emails, that's knowledge you can take into account in your forecast. And by having a forecast that you compare with the actuals, you have a much better metric to create business alerts on. So these are very, using statistical controls is a very handy way of making data quality, but also business-related notifications and alerts better. Not having too many alerts that are not relevant, but also don't miss anything that is relevant. So. I'm going through my best practices quite quickly, but maybe that's then nice that we have some time for questions later. So one other best practice, if you are using matrices like profit or lifetime value for marketing optimization, and make sure that you have a proper, especially of course if you're in retail, that you have a proper model for predicting the return rate of a transaction. If you want to calculate the profit of a transaction, you want to be able to calculate it quickly. Yeah? Immediately after the conversion, you want to have the value of your conversion so that you can send it to your marketing platform. But of course, the return period of product is much longer. So you need to predict the return rate. And you can, of course, use a very simple, what's the average return rate of a transaction in my market. But especially for steering on profit, you want a much more accurate prediction of that. And you can build a model. And the nice thing about a return rate model, it's not only product information, so the average return rate of that type of product in that market, that's interesting. But there are a lot of other features of your transaction that help to make a more accurate return rate model. The number of products that are in your basket, the number of products of the same type, except for, of course, when there are socks maybe, but for others, that could be an indication that either multiple sizes or multiple colors have been bought. But even a payment method is a feature that is predicted as a prediction on return rates. People, for example, that buy with Afterpay have a higher tendency to return products than people that buy with other payment methods. So it's really a way of optimizing. If you want to use things like CLTV and profit. For CLTV, it's the same. If you want to steer on CLTV, the last transaction that a person did, of course, it can still return, but you want an accurate prediction of the value of that transaction in order to have a proper predicted CLTV value. So you need to, you cannot just get the revenue of that transaction. Also for a proper CLTV score, that you have to make a proper estimate of that value of the transaction, so that you have a proper customer lifetime value score available that you can use for optimization. Then this is my last best practice, something that we have been working on recently. So especially, what I said, in a headless CDP environment, you don't have a centralized user interface, but you want to make sure that business users you want to enable them to do self-service on a lot of things. And one of the ways to accomplish that, of course, you could use a low-code, no-code platform to create a bespoke interface so that a business user can do those actions, can self-service those actions. Of course, a lot of things are automated within a CDP, but still, a business user wants, for example, to be able to create audiences and to say, okay, I want to use these audiences in this channel or in that channel. So where we've been working on is we started to use Looker actions to build that. And what we've done in Looker is actually we build a user interface for audience activation. So audience management can be done in Looker. Business users can create their audiences, but the nice thing about creating them in Looker, it's also a reporting system. So while creating the audience, we can show additional metrics. It's not only about how many people are in the audience, but also how many males or females are in there. What is the average order value of the people that are in that audience? A lot of additional metrics that can give that are interesting for the person that creates the audience there. By also storing the identifiers of the audience that we are sending to it, we can also then visualize overlap between audiences that we send to different to the channels, and also that is very interesting, especially while building an audience, but also if you want to evaluate the performance of your audience in the different channels. About performance, that's also, of course, a nice thing. Performance measurement, if we get all the information from the activation channels back, so we can also see how well campaigns are doing that are where our audiences are used for, so that we have a nice feedback loop there. And another handy part using actions is that when you create an audience, we can also trigger, for example, a machine learning scoring pipeline from there to enrich that audience with additional information, and that can also be handled there. So when we are working on the Google platform with our CDP, and we have Looker as one of our reporting tools, it can fill a gap. It can fill a gap for a nice number of activation use cases where we enable self-service. I put in a screenshot of one of our demos that we did. In the screenshot, you can see on the right side that the end user can use another, can create the audience, can set a lot of constraints and filters. And while the person does that, it can see, of course, how large the audience is, but also what the revenue was of the people that are in the audience in last year. We can see other things about the audience. You can show demographics, anything what is interesting for when you are building the audience. You can show that in that environment. When the audience is built, we put a button in the top left there, which you say, okay, this selection, we should create an audience from that. And then we use a Looker action There are already a lot of out-of-the-box looker actions that you can use to send the information to a channel, for example, to create a Google Ads customer match. We created another looker action that not only sends it to Google Ads, but also stores the IDs that we send in a table. And of course, you can schedule these audience to be sent regularly to the channel. And by also storing it in BigQuery, we can see also historically the size of the audience, if it grows or it gets smaller. But another very important part is because we have the identity stored, we can see the overlap between audiences. We can show that in the user interface there. So here's a screenshot. It's on a demo data set, so it's the audience names are not that interesting, but it's a nice way of visualizing the overlap between audiences, where we have an audience and we can see, okay, how much overlap do we have? Does that audience have with another audience, and what are the sizes there? So it's a very interesting way of building a solution for an end user using standard tools that are available on the platform. So these were the best practices I wanted to share. Some of them that we, I thought would be interesting for a talk like this. Any feedback? Any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. You again.
Thanks. First of all, thank you very much. I was able to understand almost 90%. I saw on 2 or maybe 3 slides the abbreviation ROAS, return on ad spend.
Yes.
Do you also have experience, or can you share your use cases about the variation being POAS?
Yes. Yeah, I put in ROAS because when you steer on revenue, it's ROAS. But in a lot of use cases, for example, where we send profit as a conversion value, you have POAS, profit on ad spend, which is of course a lot more accurate way of steering.
Yeah, exactly.
Seeing the profitability of a campaign. Yes, we do that in the marketing departments. A lot of clients do that because we are sending profit as a conversion value to the system.
Well, or just purchase instead of profit.
Sorry?
Or purchase instead of profit. Because profit, you would assume that it would include margin.
Yeah, profit is.
So I think there's a difference between profit and the sales that has been generated. But maybe it gets too difficult now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk about that later, maybe during coffee. The other question that I have, do you also have experience in ROPO, creating insights of the ROPO effect?
The ROPO effect?
Research online, purchase offline.
Yes, personally, I don't have a lot of experience with that analysis, with that part, but of course, especially in B2B situations, you want to be able, and there's then of course the identity challenge. So when people do investigation online and then buy offline, you have to be able to link that offline sales to the.
Well, I had a third question being about the consent manager. Do we also then still need the cookie consent? Because you have to combine it, I think, to be able to go from unknown to known visitors or whatever.
Yeah. Yes, and of course, I mean, and that's really in the process. So how you want to be able to do that. So if you want to be able to get that link, you have to do something on your website to convince a person to log in or to create an account or to register for an email or whatever, so that you are able to capture that online behavior and link it to an email address or to an identity that is created. And then, of course, in your offline sales process, you have to make sure that you get that information and the consent, of course, with that to then combine those two.
Okay. And Google has a solution for that. If I remember correctly, it's offline store conversions. That's typical, especially in your city.
Yeah, that's that.
that links the online search behavior, product behavior, to the actual offline purchase in store. For instance, and an identifier could be a loyalty card. Yeah, that's one of the reasons that many companies like Blocker or every retailer already has loyalty cards in order to track you as a person that you made a purchase, and then if they can in the store, and if they can link that to your online behavior, and that's possible with the given consent, then you can see what's happening, and then you can measure how profitable or not profitable it is what you are doing on the top of the funnel.
If you don't have a loyalty card program, you could do it. Like
Yeah.
register your buy.
Yeah, person should identify themselves in when doing a purchase, so like with rituals, with the loyalty system, a loyalty card. Otherwise, yeah, you can't track it. No.
Otherwise it goes. Okay.
No.
I-
Yeah.
I mean, there's some way you have to create that link. I mean, if you buy something offline and then, for example, there's a encouragement to register the product, that could be a way of linking the sales to online behavior. But still, you need to have the proper consent with that to be able to do it.
A question about real time or near real time or not real time. You stated a lot of times that real time was an essential factor.
Yes. So if you want timely timely data for timely signals, for example, to be able to act upon, then it is that's really important.
For the automated ad control then, or
I mean, that's for activation. So you want, I mean, for personalization, I think it's very obvious. If you want to personalize your website, you need the behavior as soon as possible. But another example I gave was, for example, an omni-channel scenario where, of course, if something happens on the website, you use one channel to try to contact that, but the person did not open email for 4 hours, for example, then you put it into an audience to target it, for example, in the search channel.
but then it could be a combination of several near time, real time, and not real time data that you combine as well.
Yeah, true.
Because everything real time is of course really, really difficult or expensive.
That, yeah, so of course can be more difficult. Does not need to be more expensive if you look at the way that we process data nowadays. And what I said, if you build a framework that is natively capable of handling real-time data, and depending actually, then it really depends on the source system if it is able to provide the data in real time, or if you are able to call an API multiple times a day to get the data in time. That makes it possible because that framework, because you are processing all the data in the same way with the same technology, you only have to. That's just one place where you manage your transformations and everything. And it's just the task is getting that data in near real time or in real time from the source system. That is different from between the data sources, and the rest is similar. So that's definitely not more expensive to build or to maintain. Of course, it depends on the capabilities of the source system if that is possible.
Oh, great. Thanks. More quick question with the identity graph. How do you implement that? Is that with a relational database or graph database?
Yeah, so we did already some experiments with graph databases there, but until now we use a relational database, and that's just way you just store the relationships between identities, and those are just records, and you can aggregate them. And especially real time, you make sure that you have multiple views on those relationships. You have the identifier as the key, and then the corresponding other identifiers that are linked to that. So you can very quickly query, okay, I've got a customer ID, or I've got a client ID here, which customer ID or which customer IDs are linked to that client ID.
Oh, so you've got to predefine the columns. It's not like JSON or something.
No, I mean you just store the individual relationships, and and then it becomes a graph, and it's just the way that you query it. For that, if you use a relational database or you use a non-SQL database, you have to store it in an efficient way so that it's easy to query.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.